Good day and welcome to the Milton Keynes Business Channel, where we have tips, strategies, news, events, profiles, showcasing deals, also with interviewing business leaders in and around Milton Keynes. Today we're focusing on mental wealth enablement with a wizard of wellbeing, Stephen Whitton. I'm delighted to introduce to you today.
Hi, how you doing? You okay? Thanks for inviting me.
Very well. So should we start? Why don't you tell us about your background and experience in mental health?
So I don't have a particularly a background in that, in as much as I don't do counselling or therapy. So I'm not coming from a medical professional sort of end of that side of mental health. But the reality was that after 35 years in a very male-dominated, masculine environment of the car industry, where the culture and working practice didn't really allow conversations around, how you're feeling, how you're coping, what's going on for you, anything that was seen as anything other than a drive for performance was seen as a weakness. And after 35 years in that industry, when the wheels literally fell off for me, in a big way, the pandemic hit. And I always now talk about, does anyone remember what happened in March 2020? Well, most people do, of course. And the pandemic hit, we went into lockdown, and my phone stopped ringing didn't stop ringing, I should say, with lots of customers and clients ringing me to say they were cancelling work, putting it on hold and all of that. So I had the perfect storm. My world of business just collapsed. My marriage failed and we separated. And in 2020, I realized that, hey, actually, I've talked about mental health for some time, but clearly I've got some challenges and issues myself of, depression and anxiety and, all of that other stuff. And I think the industry that I'd worked in had contributed to that. Not in a blame it kind of way, but in a, my chosen profession meant that I was in an environment where I wasn't safe to talk about this stuff. So it was at the back end of that year that I then set about going into this area of work and using the skills that I do have, which is my ability to speak and train and work with people and consult and coach to open up this subject. So at that point created the organization I now run, which is called Menable.
And what's your history in public speaking?
Well, interestingly, in that 35 years in the car industry, as I said, 20 years of it have been involved in training and people development and running workshops and stuff like that. So I'd always been, doing the kind of role that meant being on my feet in front of groups of people on stage, running events, that sort of stuff. And a large portion of that was for myself, as in my own business as a trainer and consultant. And many of the people around Milton Keynes actually will know me because I've done that for many years and shown up at various things as an MC or whatever, just because I love doing all of that so much. And and then, as I say, in 2020, the mask came off, because up to then, that role of a speaker or trainer involves you sort of being a bit jazz hands and putting on a bit of a face and becoming a bit of an actor and an entertainer. And of course, what that was doing was hiding the real me. So post this 2020 and then beyond, I properly went into professional speaking. So now I would now consider myself a professional speaker, because what I do is go out there now and share the story, share the creation of Menable, and do it from that angle. So so to answer your question, probably professional speaking properly about 4 or 5 years, but I've been in and around that sort of work for 20 odd years or so.
And what sort of tips do you give people when they're doing sales presentations or speaking publicly? What are your sort of best, most useful advice for people?
On speaking or on mental wealth?
Either.
On speaking is, I use a little thing which is, you've heard of the app What 3 Words, right? Which is the app you can use to locate things geographically. Brilliant creation. And I use that as an analogy, and I say, well, what 3 words would describe you? And, you know, think really long and hard about what that is and what that means for you. And for me, my 3 words are courage, freedom, and authenticity. So the professional speaking and the work at Menable really do link together, because for me, leaders or presenters or anyone need to have courage. They need to have the courage to, you know, have conviction, you know, take a stand in one way or the other and be who they really are. Freedom is about the freedom to make a decision and then be free to be okay with the consequences. And then the authenticity is about genuinely being the real you, you know, being who you genuinely properly are. And so I would ask, you know, suggest to anyone involved in presenting, in sales, in working in, you know, the well-being of others or whatever, to think about 3 words that describe you. And like I say, for me, it's courage, freedom, and authenticity.
What about on the mental wealth side? What sort of generic advice would you give people to stay happy and motivated at work?
Well, again, that comes back to being who you are. I mean, I've learned recently, one of the things I talk about is that I don't get stressed when I'm doing too much. I get stressed when I'm not doing enough of what I enjoy. And if it doesn't give me joy, I'm not doing it. So, you know, I'm fortunate now that I've parked the issue of needing to earn a lot of money. I've put that to one side over and prioritize the joy factor in it now. So if it doesn't give me joy, I don't do it. Now, I recognize not everyone's in that position. And so you have to do, you know, stuff that you don't necessarily enjoy. So in which case I go back to my previous sort of mantra, which was about staying present and stay in the moment. And when I look at what happened for me, I look back at the past and I have lots of regrets about things that happened and things that were said or things that were done. And when I dwell on that, I get depressed. And if I dwell on the future and make up a future that doesn't exist, and I start catastrophizing and worrying about what's going to happen and what ifs and all that, then I get anxious. So my only cure for being depressed or being anxious is to live in the moment, to live in the now. And that is my biggest tip. You know, do what you can to live in the now. And if the now means that you're actually doing something you don't enjoy doing, then just know that this will pass. But, you know, you ultimately are in control of your mental wealth. And just like your financial wealth, right? You know, it's up to you to make those investments.
So would you advise, if someone's not happy in a job, would you always advise them to move, or are there some measures they can take, like going to HR or coming to someone like you? Or
I'd ask them to really examine what is it that you're not happy with. Is it the work? Is it the company? Is it the culture? Is it the people around you? You know, really examine that quite closely. And, you know, I've had many conversations over the last few years in particular where people have come to me with exactly that predicament. And what we've ended up working out is it's not the company, it's not the people, it's that they're in a job that just doesn't fit them right. It doesn't serve them well. And so they, you know, I've seen people who have moved into completely a different role. There was a lady actually who approached me. She was absolutely stressed off the clock. Her managers were beside themselves in sort of, well, how do we get the best out of this individual? And you could see that they were rapidly heading towards some sort of clash that was going to become a performance management conversation. And when she opened up and she was quite honest, and she said, look, you know, what was going on for her was she was navigating the menopause. She'd just gone through a very tumultuous split with her partner, and she had some trouble with one of her children who was suffering quite badly with mental health as well. And put all of that together, and she was working in an environment that expected her to work 5.5 days a week. And we ended up facilitating a conversation where the business went, well, look, what we'll do is we'll move things around a bit. We'll prioritize other things in different ways. And she went on to working 4 days a week for a while. And that was transformational for her. But what it involved was her coming forward, feeling safe enough to have the conversation, and then the managers and leaders in that business having enough empathy and compassion to be able to say, okay, what do we need to do? Because we don't want to lose you, and we don't want to take you down a performance management route. So it's quite a nice example of where, just what we need to do is not far from the surface. We just need to have courage to have that conversation.
So there's certain structures and processes that should be generically in place for a company that will make their staff happier. Like there's certain mandatory, like weekly meetings, clear the air meetings, or
well, they're not mandatory as such, but I do know that the health and safety exec, just as they have rules and regulations about, banisters on stairwells and signs on doors that, that might slam quickly, or signs on the floor that say that the floor's wet and be careful, and all that sort of stuff from a physical health and safety point of view. They also do have a fairly good set of guidelines about psychological safety, which is what you've just touched on there, is how do I feel psychologically safe in my business? I don't think they've gone as far as making it mandatory yet. And I think when they do, my phone will probably light up, because I think the vast majority of leaders and managers, don't know where to start with that. And that's not a criticism, that's a reality, because they don't naturally have empathy. They don't naturally have the structure or the understanding of, well, what does that actually mean? Now I've got to think about someone's psychological safety. But what you touched on there is right. What people can start doing is the day-to-day stuff that really makes a difference. So, putting well-being at the top of one-to-one reviews, for example, doing those one-to-one reviews regularly, not making well-being something that is a performance issue, and making it as a priority for everybody, having regular communication with people. And the one thing, I use a little sort of five-part pie chart, call it the Menable pie, actually. And it's got 5 key areas to it, which we examine when I'm working with leaders. And it's about, how the level of commitment in the business, the level of training, level of communication, how well-being fits within your recruitment processes. But the key one, the big one, and this is huge for most organizations, is purpose. What is the business actually here for? Because quite often, and there's lots of stats around this, that the reason people leave jobs or they get stressed or anxious is that they don't feel that there's a connection to the purpose of the business. If the purpose of the business is all about making somebody richer somewhere up the line, then, the people around you are not going to feel that they're part of that, that purpose, unless they might in the short term be okay with all the rewards and that they get as part of that. But overall, it's that sense of belonging, that sense of purpose.
So it's a case of, when you really get analytical about it, most of the time performance issues are not related to the ability of someone professionally, but it's more something going on behind the scenes at home or something.
Yeah, quite often. Because again, if you go back to the 5-part pie chart, if you like, that didn't mean that to rhyme. If you go back to those 5 parts of the pie, recruitment is a key one. And I always say to leaders now, if they say, oh, we've got a performance issue with so and so and so and so, and I say to them, well, did you recruit them like that? Did you know that you were going to have a performance issue? And how long have they been with the business? Oh, they've been with the business 6 months or a year. Well, hang on. Whoa, hang on. Before you start going down the performance route, what have you done? What conversations have you had? Because it's very true. All of us are fighting a battle that other people know nothing about. Right. And so it's about, day to day being kind with the people around you. And if you know your people and you know where they're coming from, and you have empathy and compassion and a clear sense of purpose, and you communicate that well, you will surround yourself with people who buy into that and will open up to you and say, look, I'm struggling with this, or this is outside my comfort zone, or whatever. And that will result in you not having to have performance management conversations.
Happy people are just productive and don't need to be micromanaged.
Absolutely. I mean, people perform well when they feel good about themselves, and if you've got people in your team that are not feeling good about themselves for whatever reason, and 90% of that will be nothing to do with the workplace. It's about what's going on at home or outside of the workplace. And, that's not for us to become counselors and therapists. And that stuff is not our responsibility. But it is, while they're with us in the workplace, it is our responsibility to understand what is going on for someone. And I had one leader who said to me early doors, oh yeah, but if I start having these conversations, it'll open a can of worms and people will start swinging the lead. And I said to him, well, if you feel that that's what people in your business will do, you need to take a long, hard look at your culture. Because you don't have a culture of trust and understanding if you think that's what your people will do. And equally, if your people have to swing the lead, as you put it, or take time out because they're stressed and ring up and say that they've got something else wrong with them, then again, you don't have the culture where people feel safe to be themselves.
So what sort of results have you seen? What have been some of your success stories where you've come in and implemented this? And do you see results on the better staff retention and profit figures? And
you've hit the nail on the head. The key one is staff retention. And I've got a good few case studies now of where we've done this work. And you have to go through some pain with that, because some leaders will sort of look in the mirror and take it a bit personally that, you're saying I haven't got the skills. No, we're not saying that. We're saying that, like me, I was a manager that was put in these positions without the requisite sort of training and requirement. And then, further down the line, the results are better staff retention, reduced absences. People are far more productive. The results then speak for themselves in terms of profit or more sales or whatever it is. And one key thing, we did an exercise with a particular organization, and we noticed a 28% reduction in stress levels just from an activity of opening up and doing well-being check-ins with people, giving them a half an hour where they could literally book an appointment with me or one of my team, and they just had a check-in, just so, come on, what's going on for you? Just talk to someone independent outside of the business. And we used a very, very simple measuring method for that at the beginning of that call, and then by the end of that call, and we lumped it all together and said, wow, you've just had 28% reduction in stress levels just from those calls alone, just from people feeling they've been listened to. The key result that we've had, I've got to say, is that now I've got 2 organizations that are using the phrase, well, not only are they using the phrase mental wealth, which is amazing, because we've sort of pioneered that a little bit. But also I've got these organizations talking about what they call now honest absences. So they literally, if somebody's feeling overwhelmed or can't cope or stressed or whatever, and it has to do with work, the people are now ringing in and going, look, I need a day out. I need I need some time to reflect or think or, chill out a little bit. And then they can have an honest conversation with their manager about what's going on for them.
And I guess as you're independent, do people trust and open up a bit more to you than they would the HR department, for example?
Yeah, yes, they do, 100%. And quite often that is about them being listened to. I think HR have got a thankless task in a way, because they've always been seen as, the ones that are there for hiring and firing. Certainly in a lot of these very fast-paced environments. And I worked in HR a long time ago, and I remember, my HR director said, I'll never forget the words that she used, and she said, you all think we're here for the people, we're not. The purpose of HR is to protect the business from a reputational and a financial risk. And that's always sat with me. I was like, wow, okay. So here we've got the HR department that's saying to people, oh, come and talk to us if you've got a problem, and actually in the background, all we're doing in HR quite often is just keeping tabs on, is this likely to become something that goes to a tribunal or cost us a load of money to get out of, where we've made a recruitment mistake. So, that for me is in the work that I do, the stance that I take is, if I'm talking to a CEO, I say to them, don't fob me off to HR, because as wonderful as your HR department are and as good as they want to drive this, it's the CEO or the managing director's responsibility. It's not a task. It will become a task for them that will fit with recruitment and retention, and that's unfair on them. They're already working their fingers to the bone on that anyway.
So you're a complementary feature to add on to HR rather than replacing HR, so to speak.
Well, we work with the leaders, so we're a complementary feature to the entire business. And I've got to say, there have been a few times where I've said to leaders, when I've had conversations, they go, "Oh, you need to speak to our HR department." And I go, "Well, if you're delegating this important part of the role of a leader to the HR department, and I'm sorry, but it's conversation over." So we have had some of our significant success has been where HR have spotted the problem and have called us in, and then I've had the conversation with them and I've gone, "Look, in the nicest possible way, and I appreciate you driving this, but we need to engage your senior team, because if the senior team, the leaders, the founders, the owners, the drivers of the business aren't behind this, it will just become a task that will tick a box, and it won't necessarily move forward."
And does this fit all profiles of business, like smaller businesses? Does a business have to be a certain size to appreciate the value of this? Or
no, not at all. No, we work, as I say, my background is the car industry, so I was working predominantly in that sector, but we've started doing work now with companies, outside of that, and this works with a single person, what we used to call a one-man band. It works with them, it works with small SME, it works with big organizations, and in fact, actually, some of the smaller organizations can get some traction with mental wealth discussions quicker because they're all closer to it. The founder is generally hands-on and still in the business, and all of that. So if you're a small business with 4 or 5 people, you can get some traction with this. The issue for them is, well, what do you want to commit to it, in terms of budget and time and resource and stuff like that. So that's where the bigger companies have the benefit, is that they can throw money at it, but quite often, but the smaller companies have the benefit of being a bit closer to it. And it's even more important for them, really, isn't it? Because, we're talking about every individual.
So realistically, kind of being happier makes you more productive, more profitable. It really does fit any business in Milton Keynes. How does the implementation sort of work? Do you come in and speak to the whole company at once, or how does it?
So we're not. I don't lead an organisation that's sort of process driven, or we don't have a particular methodology. Our methodology is excuse me, quite often starts with me doing a talk. So the way we are structured is that we have a membership scheme, so people can come along and buy into what we do. Got quite an extensive YouTube channel of stuff that we share, and by being a member, they take that initial step of commitment to this subject, and then they can tap into some of the work that we do around some of the meetings and gatherings and getting people together, that sort of thing. But when we work with an individual business, we'll go in and we'll start with a very simple health and safety exec related kind of quiz or survey or whatever you want to call it, where we research based on a number of questions about, where does well-being fit in the overall structure of the business, and then we go from there. And then from that, we create an action plan, because we'll give them a gold, silver, or bronze ranking, if you like, and Yeah, and then from that we can sit down and say, right, here's some suggestions about what you might want to do. And quite often they boil down to communication.
Yeah.
There's a difference between how you feel you're communicating, business leader, to how your people feel you're communicating, and that's where we can then facilitate. Right, let's get everyone in a room and talk about this in a non-threatening, non-confrontational kind of way.
So if it's just down to miscommunication and lack of communication, I guess your solutions take effect quite quickly. A few emails, a few meetings, and the transition is quite positive and quick, I imagine.
Oh yeah, it's almost instant. I mean, the fact that as soon as a business asks us to go and work with them, and if that's whether they join us and come as part of the journey, or whether they just hire us to come in and run a one-off workshop or whatever.
Yeah.
The minute they do that, it's transformational. The conversations start immediately. People flag stuff up. I start if it's a small group, for example. So I know that in Milton Keynes, as an example, there are lots of SMEs. So if a small company of 5 people came to me and said, look, would you run a little workshop with us? I'd start that workshop with the question, right, thanks for getting together, everyone. What's got your attention as you sit here now? And from experience, just going around the room and everyone saying, well, actually, yeah, that's a really good question, because, I didn't have a great weekend, or, maybe drank too much Friday night, or I've got a kid that's not well and is off school today, or, the dog's at the vet and I'm a bit worried about him, or, whatever it might be. What you realize then very quickly is that everyone's got stuff going on outside of work. And just by acknowledging that, look, without, normally we don't talk about it, but you do bring that stuff into the workplace, and it's on the back of your mind, and that affects your performance and your productivity and all the rest of it. And none of us are robots, right? We can't just turn that stuff off. So starting meetings like that, generally, from experience, what you end up with is people saying, oh, wow, I never knew that about you. I never knew that was an issue, or, oh, Christian, thanks for sharing that with me. That's given me a different understanding of where you're at now. And suddenly what we've got is empathy, right? Suddenly we've now got an understanding of each other.
And I guess people wouldn't open up within the hierarchy of the business, whereas when you come in as a third-party expert, the communication becomes a lot more open, I presume.
Well, they do, yeah, quite often, yes. But one of the things that we do insist, as I said, is that leaders, founders, owners, MDs, whatever, that they are a key part of this. And, I talk quite openly now about, the currency of modern leadership is empathy. And what sits behind that is vulnerability as well. Gone are the days, and we're seeing this in world politics at the moment, but gone are the days where you as a leader need to be big and bold and brash and strong and put on an oversized jacket and, show everyone that you're the, you're at the top of the tree and all of that. For me, the modern currency of leadership is empathy and vulnerability. And there's nothing more powerful than a leader sitting in that room like I described, and when we go around the room, them saying, yeah, do you know what, actually, I find it difficult to sleep on a Sunday night as well, and it's because I've got so much going on in my mind, and actually at home this is happening or that's happening or whatever. Quite often in small organizations, that happens easier than it does in big ones, because in the small ones you probably already know a lot of that stuff about each other anyway, because you work quite closely together. But it's the bigger ones where you end up with a hierarchy, or you end up with structural norms, or people put into roles, or chopping and changing of staff and stuff like that. That's where it becomes problematic.
And do you ever get any kind of resistance to change generically from the workforce, or are people always happy to embrace your ideas?
Yeah, we do get a lot of resistance. But I don't come at it anymore. We don't come at it from an angle of this is about change and, we're criticizing you and, you're doing it wrong and all of that. We come at it from a perspective of empathy and understanding. Because quite often, and what I'm seeing a lot now, is that the resistance to change is based on fear, right? Any of the stuff going on in the world, and we talk about this a lot. We talk about misogyny, homophobia, racism, any of those things that sort of marginalize other people, all of that is based on fear and ignorance. And if we can help people to overcome that, then, or understand what's going on, hold a mirror up to themselves and say, yeah, actually, I need to challenge my beliefs and my values and my, understanding or whatever. And that in itself is the bit that makes the change, so then we realize, okay, so this is why you might feel reluctant to change or resist change, because actually, it's upsetting your equilibrium. Easy for me to say. It's upsetting you and taking you out of your comfort zone. That's why you're resistant to change.
Do you ever come across the odd company or culture that you can't positively change because that resistance is too great, or the culture's just odd? Or
yeah, have done. I think the worst thing though that we've come across is what we would call lip service. Is those organizations that say, oh yeah, no, we want to engage with you and we want to change and we want to do this, want to do that, and then it's a bit like the old adage that they used to say that the king or the queen thinks everything smells of fresh paint because that everything looks great when you turn up. They're getting a nice china out, but as soon as you've left the building, out come the plastic cups and the dirty rug, because we didn't want you to see that. We only wanted you to see the good stuff. So we have had a little bit of that, but again, that goes back to my point about engaging with leaders and CEOs, because if I have a conversation with somebody and I get the sense that no, you're not ready for this yet, or the problem is you, then we're quite blunt in having that honest conversation. It happens less and less, because what's happening now is that people are reaching out to us and saying, actually, something you said really resonated. I'd like to explore that. So that point I said earlier, and I've said to leaders, and I mentioned it on a podcast, actually another podcast, that I said that I'd challenge the leader to say, look, if you think people are going to swing the lead when we do this work and go off sick using the mental health card, then that says more about your culture than it does about the reality, and you as a leader need to take note of that. And on the back of that, I actually had a phone call from another CEO who said that really resonated with me. He said, because I know that that's been the case in my business, and I don't want that. I want a culture that's different to that. And we, they've been working with us now for 3.5 years. So, there are people out there that want to change and but just perhaps don't know how, and that's where we can help.
So it's like you have two levels of service. You can just come in, parachuted in, implement the processes and structure to make everyone happy, but then you offer a permanent service where someone can come to you at any time within the business to speak to you.
Yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell exactly it. Yeah, I mean, we can either come in, or as I say, I'll come in and do talks and open up this subject and talk about the importance of creating a psychologically safe, mentally wealthy environment. We can do that, or we can work with people on a longer term where they have access to services. We make it very clear we're not therapists and we're not counselors. So your question at the beginning was about my background in this. My background is lived experience. I don't have qualifications in mental health. I'm a mental health first aider, but we can talk about that in a second. That's a whole different kettle of fish. But for me, it's about the lived experience, and it's about the understanding of the impact of culture. If anyone comes to us and they really are in desperate need, then we have a referral pathway through to counselling or therapy organisations. I
see. So you refer people on to Alcoholics Anonymous or domestic violence, whatever it might be.
Whatever might be, yeah. I mean, and the cases of that are very, very low because, as I say, the work that we do is around the culture and the work in practice in a business. And you can count on one hand the number of people that have come forward and said, this is a massive issue. However, the number of people who come forward and say, I'm so glad you've opened this up, because the reason I get stressed is because the expectations aren't clear, the purpose isn't clear, my manager doesn't communicate. He thinks they communicate with me, but they don't. I don't know if I'm in the right job. I'm out of my comfort zone. You get all of that stuff, and that's what we can help with.
Going back to an early point in your conversation, you said you quite often do an audit when you first come into a business, which is quite a standard thing for any consultancy to do. Is there anything that in that audit you would identify that the business definitely needs help? Like if there's local businesses in Milton Keynes and say they're having a 20% absenteeism rate, or their average staff are leaving after 2 months, are there sort of KPIs that identify a business that could really use the help, the support?
Yeah, there are potentially after as you say, the audit. I mean, we try not to call it that, because that has a suggestion of sort of trying to trip you up and pick up on where you're not doing stuff right. But yeah, I mean, the outcome quite often, that audit, for want of a better word, ends up becoming a conversation that the leaders then, I've had quite a few where they've sort of sat back in their chair and they've gone, oh my God, the light bulb's just gone on, that I've just twigged, just from that one question, I've just twigged why we've got this issue or why we've got this problem. And quite often, like I say, the outcome and the action really boils down to communication. It really boils down to getting people together. It's not about processes and procedures. It's not about saying to HR, we've got a 30% staff turnover. What are you doing about it? Because, like I said, those guys and girls are quite often reactive. They're fighting fires. They're seen as the team that hire and fire. And as much as they try to be strategic and do more around that, in reality, that's a tough one. That's a tough one for them. And so it is about engaging the leaders, and that audit process really just opens up those conversations, and then starts to say, right, why have we got people leaving? Well, we've got quite often people leaving because the communication isn't clear. There's no sense of purpose. They're not leaving because they can't do the work, and they're not leaving because you didn't give them long enough lunch break, or the coffee machines run out. They're not leaving because of that. The vast majority of people, if you ask them to be honest, leave an organization because there is some issue between them and their manager or their leader or the owner of the business or whatever it might be. It's a disconnect in terms of communication and relationships, and that's what the audit does actually flag up.
Any other tips for local business owners to keep everyone happy and productive at work?
Keeping everyone happy and productive is such a massive sort of subjective view, but I think it is genuinely about making sure that you have empathy and understanding. And I mean, I've had some of the toughest conversations over the years in work that I've done, when I've been a leader and I've run car dealerships and stuff, right? So some of those conversations were pretty tough, and ending up with you parting company with people that yesterday you were sat in the tea room having a coffee with, and now you're parting company, and that's not comfortable. So I think my tip for anyone in a business is make your life easier by communicating clearly. Have an absolute crystal clear vision of where you're going, what your business is about, what your purpose is, and your expectations as a result of that. Recruit to that. And one of the things that we all as in industries have always done is we've recruited in our own likeness. So we tend to recruit people who look, act and sound like us, and we think that's a good fit. What I've learned over the years is actually the best fit is to have a room full of people that are nothing like you at all, in every respect, because that brings diversity, and it brings creativity and all the rest of it. But then as a leader, you need to have the courage to step back and go, right, I've employed these people because they can do a fantastic job. I'm going to step back and let them do that job. And then, of course, it's about making sure they've got the requisite skills, the training, and all of that stuff. But my key tip for anyone in business, And like I said, I've run businesses with 70 staff. I've run a business with just 2 people, me and one other. And in every case, it's about your own clarity of purpose, direction, and then being able to communicate that.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think for me, the one thing that's been transformational for our business is that we changed the language from mental health to mental wealth. Now, I know you mentioned that at the beginning, and I have had a few people who've sort of raised an eyebrow and gone, "Oh, right, okay, interesting. What's that about?" And we've done the exercise. I'd love it, people to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I put a video on recently where I was with, I don't know if you saw it, but I put the video of me speaking to a group of people, and I used a Slido on a slide that says, give me the words that talk about mental health. And they came up with a great big long list of, fairly negative, downbeat kind of words. And then I said, right, now let's look at that from another angle. Now let's do this from the perspective of mental wealth, and explained a bit about what mental wealth is. And of course, all the words that came up were support, nurturing, caring, together, collaborative, enjoyment, fun, all of that. And I was like, wow, that's where I want to work.
Yeah, I see.
There's a place that operates like that. And all that's done is change one letter to change the emphasis. And now let's talk about being mentally wealthy. And just like physical financial wealth, we're all at different stages. But your mental wealth is not dependent on what house you live in and what car you drive and what watch you wear and what suit you've got on, or any other external measures of success, which is the stuff that we have traditionally used to beat ourselves up with, because I'm not living in a 5-bedroom detached house by the time I'm 50, then, oh my God, I'm a failure. Well, really, let's look at your mental wealth first. Let's prioritize that.
Okay, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. I will put all of Stephen's details and links in the description of the video.
Thank you. Thanks for giving us the platform to share this stuff.
Great pleasure speaking with you. Thanks very much for your time. Have a good day, guys.
And you. Cheers.